Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marc Dunkelman.
It's been roughly a half century since Jane Jacobs emerged as the conscience of metropolitan New York. And when we think about her today, in the prevailing sense, we think about her being the person that stopped the bulldozing of major portions of the city. But in her writing, she had an even more important legacy, which was that before diversity became a virtue in our minds, she realized it was a necessity. And that it wasn't just that diversity brought people together, but it was a diversity, she thought, that the magic of New York and the magic of urban areas was that it forced people to interact. What's remarkable is that much as we think about her as someone who was identified with urban America, she was identifying a certain social architecture that existed right at the beginning of the American experiment. It existed in colonial villages, in frontier towns, in urban tenements, in first-ring suburbs even. And what she believed, and really the crucial element, is that those interactions were the DNA of American exceptionalism in the best sense of the term. That's sort of the first point that I think we need to get across, that for all we talk about the quality of American institutions, our wonderful universities, our natural resources, the thing that set America apart was that we organized ourselves geographically. We had people who lived near one another who couldn't avoid one another interacting in an everyday fashion. And much as Europe was organized around class or background, Americans, even if they didn't get along with one another in villages and towns and cities and neighborhoods, there was something very special about that core element. So that's the first point that I wanted to get across in the few minutes that I have to talk to you. The second point that I want to get across is that today, for the first time in American history, that core competency is under a new threat. And this time, the threat isn't coming from Robert Moses or from urban developers. It is in some cases, but broadly the threat is coming from a very subtle change in the way that we organize our own time and our own lives. So let me explain that and take a step back. Imagine for a second your own personal social universe in a diagram that looks like the rings of Saturn. And your most intimate contacts are in the innermost rings, and they become less and less intimate as you move further and further out. Maybe the outermost ring is the barista that you ordered a latte from 3 days ago, and you'll never speak to her again. Over the course of the last 50 years, for the first time in American history, and for a whole variety of reasons, we've begun to invest our time and energy much more in the innermost rings, in the people that we text with, our friends, our best friends, our parents, our children, our spouses, and also in the outermost rings, people that we have a single common affinity with, people that may share our politics or a hobby or whatever it is. And what's been lost in the course of that transition, really for the first time in American history, are the middle ring relationships, people with whom you are familiar but not intimate, people that would be in the PTA or that you would know across the street or that you'd be in a bowling league. This is what Robert Putnam was talking about in Bowling Alone 15 years ago. The point that I want to stress to you is that the thing that Jane Jacobs prized, and really at the root of her literature, was that those middle ring relationships are the essence of what make up a thriving neighborhood. It's not necessarily that you have access to unlimited amounts of contact with people who you share a common affinity. It's that through the course of those middle ring relationships, you were talking to people who had different points of view, had different experiences. And that's where good ideas were coming from, and that was the essence of the American experiment. The effect is widespread, but it is so widespread that we're not seeing it all put together. The effect is that in the absence of having these middle ring relationships where we're sharing ideas and experiencing things from other points of view in some substance, we're unable to maintain the institutions that have existed for the bulk of American history. So to give you one example, There's a famous experiment, or not so famous experiment, I hope it's someday a famous experiment, done by a political scientist at Stanford, who takes representative groups of people who disagree about some issue, whether it's the environment or urban planning or a fiscal issue, puts them in a room, polls them on where they are on an issue, then gives them some time to talk about it, sometimes a little bit of information, lets them talk about it some more, and then polls them again. He finds that in 75% of cases, they poll at the end differently than they had at the beginning. That simply the act of talking to people who have different points of view changes your perspective. That is an experience that happens in neighborhoods. It's an experience that happens in townships. It's an experience that happens in the middle rings. And so as we think about this conference and what you guys are doing in your everyday lives, and as we plan for the 21st century, the crucial question is, how are we going to retain the vitality born in those middle ring relationships? I really want to congratulate you for all the work that you're doing and what you're thinking about in your own lives and for being here. But I hope that this idea that we are shifting where we put our time and attention, becomes a new focus for those who are trying to build a 21st century that is as vibrant and as exciting as the 20th. Thanks very much.